So, what really makes us human? Is it something we're born with, or is it something we learn from the world around us? Well, in 1970, a real-life, tragic answer to that question walked out of the shadows. This is the story of Jeannie, a girl who spent almost her entire childhood locked away in total silence. Her discovery created what's now known as a forbidden experiment, a chance to see what happens to a human mind that grows up without the one thing that truly connects us all: language. Think about that for a second. The world will never understand. These are the chilling words Jeannie's father left behind in his suicide note. And that single sentence, it just hangs over this entire story. It's a confession, right? A confession of a crime so awful he believed no one could ever truly comprehend it. It perfectly sets the stage for what is an incredibly dark story of abuse, of scientific ambition, and ultimately, of failure.
You know, the whole story came out by complete accident. Jeannie's mother, who was nearly blind, was actually looking for disability benefits for herself. She just happened to walk into the wrong office. But the social worker there didn't see the mother. Her attention was immediately drawn to the child with her. This girl was supposedly 13, but she weighed less than 60 pounds. She was still in diapers, and she moved with this strange shuffling bunny walk. And just like that, in that one moment, a 13-year secret was blown wide open.
So the first question authorities had to answer was pretty basic. Who is this girl? And what in the world has been done to her? The physical evidence alone told a story of just unimaginable neglect.
You know, when you look at these clinical findings, they aren't just data points. They are a literal map of her prison. That bunny walk is because she'd been restrained her whole life, unable to properly extend her arms or legs. Her inability to chew? Well, she'd only ever been fed mushy baby food. And maybe the most haunting detail of all, she couldn't focus her eyes on anything more than 12 feet away, because for 13 years, that was the exact size of her world.
So, of course, the legal system moved in fast. Her parents were arrested and charged. But on the very morning he was scheduled to appear in court, Jeannie's father, Clark Wiley, shot and killed himself, leaving behind that cryptic note. As for her mother, Irene, the charges against her were eventually dismissed. The court decided that she too was a victim of her husband's brutal and controlling behavior.
And this is where the story takes a really sharp turn. It stops being just a legal case and becomes a major scientific one. Jeannie's life became known as the forbidden experiment, a horrific situation that no scientist could ever ethically create, but one that offered a tragic glimpse into the architecture of her isolation.
Let's be really clear about what her life was like. During the day, she was harnessed to a potty chair, often naked and alone. At night, she was put into a kind of straitjacket and locked inside a crib that was covered with wire mesh. Her father couldn't stand noise, so he would beat her anytime she made a sound. There was no radio, no TV, no human voice, just a world of almost complete silence and loneliness. And this is why scientists were, well, both horrified and completely fascinated. Jeannie's upbringing, as awful as it was, created a perfect, if terrible, natural experiment. Here was a human mind that had developed almost entirely without that key ingredient we all associate with being human: language. The big question was, could she learn it now? Was it too late? So, at the very heart of this was one big, powerful theory called the critical period hypothesis. It basically suggests that there's a limited window of time in early childhood when our brains are just perfectly wired to learn language. But after that window closes, sometime around puberty, the door might be shut for good. Jeannie, discovered at age 13, became the ultimate tragic test case for this very idea. And you know, for a little while, it really seemed like a miracle was possible. In her first few years of freedom, Jeannie's progress was amazing. It gave everyone hope that maybe, just maybe, the human spirit could overcome even the most horrific beginning.
I mean, it was incredible. The intelligent, curious person who had been locked away for all those years began to emerge. She learned how to play, she loved music, and she would draw these amazing pictures to communicate really complex ideas. Best of all, her vocabulary just exploded. She was like a sponge, soaking up hundreds and hundreds of new words. It really seemed like she was going to be okay.
But here's the thing we don't often think about. Learning language is unbelievably complex. Just take the word bread. Okay, first you learn the name for the loaf. But then, is a single slice also bread? What about a crumb? Then you have to learn to categorize that pumpernickel and flatbread are both bread, but dough isn't. And then you get to abstract ideas, like toast is something bread becomes. For Jeannie, starting from 0 at age 13, every single word was a mountain of concepts to climb. And this is where she hit a wall.
A really hard wall. While she learned tons of words, her grasp of grammar, of syntax, was almost zero. She could string words together to make a request, like want milk, but she could never really form proper sentences, or use plurals, or ask a question. It was like she had all the individual musical notes, but she could never learn the music that connects them into a song.
And then, her language acquisition just stalled. This was the heartbreaking finding. The Genie team had their answer. It seemed the critical period for learning the rules of grammar was real, and for Genie, that window had slammed shut forever. She was living, breathing, tragic proof of the theory.
Okay, so the scientific questions were seemingly being answered, but as that was happening, a whole other human tragedy was unfolding. The line between helping Genie and studying her got incredibly blurry, and eventually, the research seemed to completely defeat the treatment.
And it all boiled down to this one toxic question. Was she a patient who desperately needed therapy, or was she a test subject for a once-in-a-lifetime experiment? You know, everyone involved claimed they wanted what was best for her, but their own ambitions and their competing theories created this chaotic storm where Genie's actual well-being often got lost in the fight over the data she was producing.
The whole project just started to fall apart. There was bitter infighting among the researchers. Genie was living with her main therapist, which basically turned her foster home into a 24/7 laboratory. It got so bad that in 1974, the National Institute of Mental Health pulled all their funding, saying the research was just too chaotic. And maybe the final blow? Genie's own mother sued the team for exploitation.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to this. This is what one of the original psychiatrists on the team, Dr. Jay Shirley, said later, looking back. His words are, just a painful admission that in their search for knowledge, they had failed her and had, in their own way, exploited her all over again.
And here's maybe the hardest part of all to swallow. Once the money was gone and her language had plateaued, Genie wasn't a scientific prize anymore. And one by one, the researchers, the very people who'd become the center of her new world, they moved on, leaving her to face everything all alone.
So after the science ended, what happened to the girl at the center of it all? Well, Genie's next chapter became a profound cautionary tale, not just about research, but about the very systems that are supposed to protect the vulnerable.
This timeline is just devastating to look at. After a short, failed attempt to live with her mother, Genie was shuffled through a series of state-run foster homes. In one of them, she was severely beaten as punishment for vomiting. And this new trauma was so intense that she completely regressed. She became terrified to even open her mouth, and she fell right back into that deep silence from which she had worked so hard to emerge.
The ultimate tragedy is this. Genie escaped her father's prison only to be completely failed by the system that was meant to save her. The new abuse she suffered in foster care wiped out years of progress. It silenced the voice that so many people had tried so hard to awaken.
But her story did leave a legacy. It wasn't all for nothing. The absolute shock of her case led to real change. It re-energized child protection laws and became the ultimate, grim lesson in ethical research. Her life is this permanent, stark reminder of our duty to protect the most vulnerable among us.
So in the end, we're left with this really tough question. We call our story a scientific tragedy. And sure, her case taught us so much about the brain and language. But maybe the real tragedy wasn't the science itself. Maybe it was the failure of everyone involved to balance that search for knowledge with simple human compassion. It's a question that reminds us that behind every experiment, behind every data point, there's always a human being.